We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vallotton. All right, well, welcome back to the BraveCo podcast. This week, I have my favorite all-time guest, my mom. Mom, thank you so much for coming on here.
Hey, thanks for having me. What a special treat for me.
Yeah, I thought it would be kind of fun to bring you on and, just talk about how I grew up, and there's a lot of stories that I want to dive into, and then ask you questions about life too, and just get some wisdom from, some older, wiser people.
Watch out for that older word.
Well,
more mature,
wiser people. So, it's going to be fun. I grew up our home growing up, I should say, was always super loving, like godly Christian home. You and Dad did such a good job raising us. And when I was thinking about this podcast and what to talk about, I was thinking back to some early times as a little kid. And you and Dad had home group at our house growing up.
For years.
Like 20 years.
Long time.
Yeah. And you guys were always huge on, for us kids, right? Like I remember church wasn't something that I always wanted to go to, but Dad used to say, you don't have to go, you get to go. Yeah.
You guys hated that.
I hated it so much.
But you went.
We went. And then I remember growing up, how did Dad used to motivate us to worship at church? Do you remember?
Gosh, he probably gave you something.
Yeah. So if we
worshiped, remember what it was.
Yeah, if we'd raise our hands at church, we'd get an ice cream after church.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember one Sunday I didn't, but the girls did. And we went to the grocery store and he bought them ice cream and didn't buy me one.
You remember that?
Yeah, what a savage.
But what happened the next week?
Oh, gosh, are you kidding me? I made sure to raise my hand, both hands, that way I could get a big ice cream.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. But one of the things that I have so many funny little stories growing up, but you guys are always big on involving us in everything that you did. And there was a good side to that and a bad side to that, right? Like the good side to that is we were growing and learning about God and, doing stuff with the family. The downside to that for me was when you guys started learning about the supernatural and practicing casting out demons.
I would have thought that would have been an exciting time for you.
Well, here's the thing. In this podcast today, some people you're going to hear some stories that I haven't talked about much on the podcast, and not everyone, maybe not even everyone's a believer on here, which to me is like, whatever, it's all good. You don't have to believe in what I believe, or maybe you have a different flavor of Christianity than I do, like maybe you're Baptist and I'm more alternative, non-denominational, whatever. But these are stories from my childhood that I went through, and
it's hard to argue with an experience.
Yeah.
Over an experience.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of them growing up, thanks to you and Dad.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And in the early years, right, and maybe you can kind of talk through this, I'll set you up here in a second. But the early years, when I remember back to home group and youth group at our house, what I remember is like these pretty fun gatherings in Dad teaching and you guys leading worship, doing stuff like that. But then I have these really strong memories of like, that story that Dad tells where the kid was demon possessed in our house.
Yeah, I'll call him Steve.
Steve, that wasn't
That's
his
not
name.
That's not.
I
his
can't
name.
remember his name.
I can.
It was like Daniel or something.
That's how much it's embedded in my mind.
Yeah. And so he tells a story, right? This kid's, I think he had just got saved. Did he not? Or he just started coming to youth group, this kid?
He just started coming to youth group. His mom begged us to reach out to him.
Yeah.
I mean, she had done everything that she could possibly could as a mom, and she was a single mom.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And it just, it's, what do you do when you have a son that's
Out of control.
And back then there wasn't any labels. I don't know if he was schizophrenic or bipolar or,
Yeah.
what he was, but
Yeah.
he just wasn't in his right mind a lot.
No. And he had asked the girl sitting next to him if he could have sex with her at home group.
Amongst these, most of the kids are probably like 13.
So in the middle of home group, he turns to this girl and asks if he can have sex with her.
He was a pretty scary looking guy,
Yeah,
too.
I bet. Well, long story short, right? He freaks out mid home group.
He did. He started going around to all the girls, and of course they were panicking, and your dad said something to him like, we don't act like that.
Yeah.
We don't do that to girls.
Yeah.
And he started flipping out, and you kids were supposed to be in bed.
We were never in bed.
You weren't. We had a loft. Remember the loft?
Yeah. So our house was 2 stories, and on the second story, there was a loft that we could like crawl up to and look over at what was happening downstairs.
Yeah.
And downstairs was where all the gatherings were, and we could like peek over and see, but you guys could see us in the windows.
And we never told you that.
Yeah. Well, so that particular night, I mean, he is, and this is just one of many stories. I'll get into a couple more, but because I'm going somewhere with this, but anyways, he freaks out and he starts going nuts.
He did. He ran upstairs.
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you?
Yeah. And I think somebody caught him on the stairs and pulled him down.
Yeah.
So he was like coming after us kids.
Yeah.
Like psycho. And then you guys got him outside.
Yeah. Got him outside and thought that was going to be the end of him. And, all these screams and noises were coming from him, and it was pitch black.
Yeah.
It was nighttime. You couldn't see. And all the girls were laying flat on the ground praying. And all the guys were trying to be this big macho, macho men. And they must have been probably 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. And they went running outside, and it was like, this is awesome.
Poor kid.
And your dad was down on the drive area, the gravel, and
outside. Yeah.
not really knowing exactly what to do. I mean, we were all learning. And Danny Silk, do you remember Danny being there? Danny Silk was there, and he went running outside. He had just gotten saved not very long before that. And he said, this is amazing. This is just like the chapter of Acts. Or a chapter in
the book of Acts,
in
the Bible,
Acts, in the Bible. And he was so excited about what he was seeing. And that's kind of how our deliverance ministry ended up starting.
Yeah, it's so wild. I mean, okay, so there was this other lady that lived with us. Mm-hmm. So my childhood was so crazy. When I look back now,
I can't believe that we did that.
I can't believe you did that either.
Could you imagine doing that with Edie and
Never
Liam?
would I ever do that.
Never ever would I let you.
So people don't know what we're talking about, but here's my childhood. So right, my mom and dad are learning. They had gotten saved a little while before, and started following God, and we're going to church, and like you read in the Bible about the prophetic and the supernatural and demons being cast out. Like Jesus actually says, this is how like people who follow me will be able to cast out demons, heal the sick, raise the dead. Right. So like we hold this really strong conviction, even to this day, of like, man, this is our role as believers is to do the stuff that Jesus did. Mm-hmm. So early years, there wasn't all this training on like prophetic ministry or deliverance ministry.
I wish there was.
Yeah. And so, everyone was trying to figure it out. Like you guys were trying to figure it out, and it was messy. And so we had this lady, a friend of ours, her name was Tracy Evans, who was awesome. She was a missionary in the Philippines and just a really radical, like she's probably the bravest person that I know.
She had gorillas, not animals, but gorilla men coming after her.
Yeah.
And they didn't realize that she knew how to speak Tagalog, and they were plotting to kill her.
Oh, I know. She's insane.
In the heart of the jungle in the Philippines, and she ended up escaping.
Yeah, she's been captured and escaped so many times.
Shot at 3 times. I mean, point blank shot at.
Yeah.
The gun misfired.
Shipwrecked.
Crazy.
Like the Apostle Paul.
Yeah, exactly.
So she had gotten this lady saved, right? And the lady who she got saved was Anton LaVeyne's daughter. Spiritual daughter. Which, if you don't know who Anton LaVeyne is, he was like the head of the Satanic Church. Mm-hmm. So she witnessed to this girl, got her saved, brought her to our house, and then you guys let her stay with us.
We did.
You let her sleep at our house.
We did. But I'm thinking of all the stories that you haven't even told back there that even led up to that.
Oh my God.
The gal ended up in the rubber room in the hospital because, do you remember this part?
Well, here's the thing. I don't remember the chronological order.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the stories in order. So
yeah, but she was all cut up.
Oh yeah, I don't remember that.
She was completely cut up by barbed wire because she was being chased by demons.
Oh yeah.
And she was trying to get away from them. She had a horrible upbringing.
Really bad
upbringing.
Yeah.
And then just one thing after another. She had beat up 5 guys in a bar by herself.
Yeah.
She was like 6'1", built like a man, strong, tough.
Yeah.
Sad.
It's honestly, I know that. Well, I'm not laughing because of her, obviously her being demon possessed, but the fact that I was introduced to this world so young, right? Nobody knew what they were doing.
You, Jay, were 18 months old, and she used to hold you all the time.
Yeah.
Because she had a daughter of her own that had been taken away from her, of course.
Yeah.
And you kind of filled that
I
void
mean,
it's
explaining a lot. Well, I remember one of the stories that you guys share is, again, where you guys are in home group, and she's sitting there in home group holding a baby doll.
Oh, yeah.
She's holding the baby doll. In mid worship, she rips the head off the baby doll and freaks out, turns into this other being, and starts, manifesting.
Your poor sister. My baby. She pulled the head off my baby.
Golly.
It was.
So take me through, like, what were you guys thinking? Because I've thought about that a lot, right? I've thought about that a lot. Like I have little kids.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't never, right? Like we have Airbnb at our house, and I'm nervous about that. Like we lock the door up top. It's a separate entrance. And I'm like, man, but knowing that somebody's, a little bit crazy, what was the motive?
I think a lot of times God blinds us from things.
Yeah.
He hides things from us.
Yeah.
And there's seasons of our life. And we were just in a season of our life where God, that's one thing about God. He knows, our beginning from our now to our end. He knows everything. Yeah. And he takes us and puts us in situations where we learn, we grow. Would I make that same decision now? Of course not.
No.
I'm not in that season. And if somebody came up to me, I would have to say, you really would have to hear from God in order to do that. And we did. I mean, your dad never forced anything on me that I didn't say, I think we should do this. Yeah. But on the flip side, so many amazing things happened. We had a prophet guy come to dinner one day, and she would sleep on the couch. She wasn't upstairs with
the prophet.
Arlene.
Oh, no. Oh, you had a prophet guy come.
We had a prophet guy come to our house for dinner.
Okay, yeah.
And the girl that we were talking about, she would sleep on the couch because we never let her sleep upstairs with you guys. And your dad and Danny, his name was Danny, were discussing kind of in a heated discussion over the Bible. And she had been asleep and she sat straight up and she started quoting scripture. This is only after she had been in the house with us for like 3 months. She was quoting scripture, answering the questions that they were talking about.
Crazy.
And then laid back down again. I mean, God used her over and over and over.
Yeah.
In so many ways, in so many situations, that it was amazing. And seeing her transformation.
Yeah.
I mean, when she first came to live with us, she had done so much speed and meth. She had lost so much weight. Her clothes were literally hanging on her.
Wow.
And she had no money.
Wow.
We had no money. So I took out my sewing machine and altered all of her clothes
Wow.
so that, she'd have something to wear, and taught her how to act like a lady, and just.
It's part of what I love. Like when I look back, I know I'm saying like, gosh, what were you thinking? The flip side of this is, so I have counseled this girl. I don't want to say who she is, of course, a mutual friend of ours' daughter. And she called me, she was like in college, and she called me and she said, hey, I'd counseled her since she was 16, So she calls me and she said, man, I'm just really struggling with knowing, like, how do you know that God's real? Like, that he's even real, that there's not like all these other religions. And I was explaining to her, I said, you know what the problem is that you've never actually had to use your faith, right? Like growing up, there was such a stark contrast between the supernatural, like angels and demons,
like good and evil,
heaven and hell, good, evil, the devil and God. There was and I saw it, right? Because we lived in that. And so, again, not to freak everyone out, but this is my childhood. Like I can remember being 14 years old. So I'm 14 years old. I'm at youth group, and we had done deliverance ministry now for a long time. And so I had kind of learned, like, hey, find out what gave the enemy access into their life. And usually it's like bitterness, unforgiveness has opened up a door in people's lives.
Right.
Sexual stuff can do that too. And then the enemy has access. And so I was at youth group one night, and this friend of mine in youth group, she started manifesting a demon, and which basically for that meant, I mean, she was like clawing at herself, and there's a voice coming out of her that she wasn't moving her mouth, but a voice is coming out of like her stomach. Just a really freaky, it's a freaky thing. And so, anyways, I started helping her and found out that it was a whole bunch of unforgiveness stuff. Right?
Oh yeah.
And once we worked through that unforgiveness, like literally, like once she chose to forgive, and like boom, we were able to like close access to the enemy and invite the Holy Spirit back in, and everything's over, right?
Yeah.
Like she's back into her right mind. She's not clawing herself anymore. She's just like in this really beautiful, peaceful place. And I mean, we've seen that journey with people like
hundreds of times. When you grow up in an environment like that, you have no question whether or not God's real or the devil's real, right? Yeah.
It like creates this like hard, fast, like, wow, I can never argue with this. And that was the benefit of it all. I did realize later on in life that I have some like trauma from those years though. I mean, for reals, because and why I say trauma is like, I realized later on in life because this happens, right? Like I'll be on the prayer lines at the church and someone will start manifesting a demon and be freaking out. And I realized like, whoa, I have a lot of anxiety, a lot of, like it's triggering. And I have to like work myself through it and calm down.
You have to push through it. I remember when, I forget what we're calling her, Susan.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
and I don't know if you even remember this or if you just remember stories.
Yeah.
She, there was a guy that was coming to our church to speak. His name was Dick Joyce.
Yeah.
From Mexico.
Yeah.
And he was up speaking, and we were in our little church at Calvary Chapel, wasn't yet Mountain Chapel. And I told Susan, I'll save a place for you, because she had to go clean somebody's house. And so, have you ever been in a situation where you can like feel somebody behind you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I did, and I turned around, and there she was standing in the back of the church. There's a little door you can come in from the outside. And I just said, here I am, and she's like looking over me with this real serious looking face. And I'm thinking, she just doesn't see me. So I get up and I'm like, Susan, come on, I have a seat for you. And still just looking completely past me. So I get up and I move closer to her, and I'm about from here to you, from me, and I'm like, Susan. And all of a sudden I realized I know that look in her eyes. And she turned into this cat, and she started coming after me with her teeth and her hands going for my throat. And I was walking backwards, and the only thing I knew to do was say, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And it happened to be that Dick was watching this, and he has a huge deliverance ministry. We had the sheriff in the congregation, the undersheriff in the congregation, and one of the head sergeants in there, plus your father.
Golly.
And so everybody is up and running towards her. And poor thing, there was a hurricane fence between us and Campora, and she ran towards it, and she's climbing up.
Oh, so she ran out the door.
She ran out the door, yeah, and she ran towards the hurricane fence, trying to climb over it. And one of the deputies grabs her down, and she takes a punch, and she pushes him out, and she's running for the highway.
Oh, geez.
Highway 299. And it's not like a super busy highway, but there's cars and trucks going all the time. And she's running, and your father is running after her as fast as he can and jumps her and brings her to the ground just before she gets out to the street. And she's just manifesting, and of course the cops get her and handcuff her and put her in the back of the car. And I remember your dad saying, let me back there with her, let me back there with her. And I think that the cops were like,
no way, you're crazy.
Who's more crazy, her or you?
Yeah.
So he did, and he just prayed over her, and she instantly came out of it, was back in her right mind, crying. And so she went back into the hospital for 3 more days. And I think that was one of the hardest 3 days of my life.
Wow.
Because up until then, she'd been in our home for 6 months.
Wow.
We'd seen so much transformation. We didn't know what had happened to trigger her to become possessed again. Come to find out, she'd taken a drink over at the house that she used some alcohol, and it just opened the door back up.
Wow.
And she just lost it. But I remember talking to Benny Johnson saying, I don't know what we're going to do, because either she's going to go out on the street and everything that we've done for her is going to be in vain. Yeah. Or am I going to take her back into our home, knowing everything that I know? And talk about traumatized. It was like a year for me where I couldn't even look into a window because I would see her face. Oh, wow. Or I would.
Right. It was scary for you. Yeah.
It was super scary, scary. When you're standing just feet from somebody and they come out. At you like a wild animal. That's,
so scary. Yeah.
It was so scary. So we ended up taking her back in. That was,
God, you guys are so brave.
I don't know. The God's grace is all I can think of. He gives you grace in the situation that you're going through. Yeah. To be able to make it. And then the tough decision. I just remember feeling like he was saying to me, are you going to take in people only when it's easy? Wow. I thought, no, and she needs our love more now. Yeah. And she needed our forgiveness more now than she did before. So we took her back in about 3 months, she ended up leaving. She got married, which by that time we were ready to see her go. Yeah. But it was interesting. About 10 years ago now, we were in a landscaping place, And I looked, and there's this old truck that came into the driveway. And I looked, and I thought, that's Sharon. And I bumped your dad. I said, look, there she is. And he's like, there's who? And I said, Sharon, she's in that truck. And so she got out, and her body was just wrecked. I mean, she just walking with a cane and just looked really, kind of like she had aged more than her age.
Yeah.
And I said, Susan. And she stopped, and she kind of looked over, and we walked over towards her, and he said, do you remember us? And she looked and looked, and I said, Chris and Kathy. And she started crying. She's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're here. And she told us what she'd been doing and told us about her daughter. And
wow.
So, but you just never know the difference that you're going to make in somebody's life. And then being able to see the hand of God working in your home.
People are probably wondering why you called her Susan and then Sharon. It's because you're using a fake name.
Oh, sorry.
So you forgot. My mom's not crazy.
No, not. Well.
Not yet. Well, and that's what I love, right? Is you guys were the day and age where you really put your faith into action.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't see nowadays, right? Is they don't get a chance to look back at your guys' early years before dad was who dad is and you are who you are. Like, you guys spent so much time walking out the gospel, walking out the Christian life in practical ways.
Yeah, it wasn't just textbook information.
No. Walking by faith.
Yeah.
And I just so admire that. You and dad, what I remember growing up too is you and dad always having to live by faith, which basically means you don't have any money.
No money.
No money, right? But dad tells a story a lot. He talks about he wanted to be in ministry.
Yeah.
That was his big I just can't wait to do ministry. But God told him to open up
service station.
A gas station. Yeah, service station. And dad was like, I don't want to do that. I
want to be in ministry.
And God said, well, if you open up a gas station, I'll bless you. And then you guys were broke all the time.
Oh man.
No money.
But miracle after miracle we saw, it was just like, I think that's why I entitled my book what I did, the good, the God, and the ugly.
The ugly, yeah.
Which that so describes our life.
Yeah. It's true. Those early years, how did you do it? How did you make it those early years? Because when I look, I'm the age, I'm a little bit older than I'm 42. So, I can remember dad now at 42 at my age. It's hard to tell, you know what I'm saying? When you're young, it's hard to be who was my dad at this age? Yeah. I can remember him at 42. But when I think back, those early years of being married and raising kids are so tough. And then on top of that, you guys were constantly, growing a business and just strapped all the time, strapped. How did you do that? How did you go through those tough years, those lean years of our cars being repossessed, our house being foreclosed on, I could sit here and tell story after story of those are hard years. How did you do that?
They were really hard years. And for most of it, I wouldn't ever want to go through it again.
Yeah.
But yet I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah.
Because, just the stories that we were telling, that we were talking about, that builds faith inside of you. So we go from faith to faith to faith to faith. It's not like all of a sudden we get thrown into the kettle, into the hot water.
Yeah.
It's kind of a continual building and just, taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ and not letting the enemy flood your mind or your imagination with something that is going to totally destroy you. Because the Bible says, greater is he.
Yeah.
Greater is he, greater is Jesus, greater is God.
Yeah.
That's in me than he that's in the world, which is the enemy.
Yeah.
The enemy wants to kill, steal, and destroy. And God wants the opposite for each of us. And so, it's not like I didn't have my bad times, my bad moments. I can remember you kids being in school, and we had my office at home so that I could still work and be there for you guys. But in doing so, I would get probably 20 to 30 collection calls on our phone in our home, which then there was no sanctuary to go home to.
Right.
Because we had brought it right in the midst of us so that I could stay home with you kids. And I remember laying on the futon just crying out to God, why? I don't understand. We've done everything you've asked us to do, and yet I don't understand why we're going through this. And I just realized that, I have control over my mind. I have control over my thoughts. I can choose to, let the enemy win.
Yeah.
Or I can say, no, God's got a better plan than this.
Yeah.
And I'm being crafted and formed and, shaped for something that's greater.
Yeah.
You look at the Bible and it's filled with all kinds of tests and trials that people went through. And, most of them are way harder than what we've gone through. But if we didn't go through those, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing now.
Yeah. It's like, where would you be in life without doing hard things? Not very far.
Not very far. Mm-mm.
But it's those hard things that make life so challenging too. And, I think what's interesting as well is, like, you guys didn't really have, times back then were so different.
Very different.
It wasn't like you had a whole bunch of people to reach out to go like, okay, how do we do this? How do we, like, I got collection people calling me and I'm trying to run a business and I'm trying to raising kids. Like, you didn't, even for raising kids, like, you didn't have Danny Silk back then to go like, how do we raise kids well? And what are like the 5 steps to like getting your kids to sleep at night? And,
I wish
you guys didn't have any of that stuff.
It was all, trial and error and God's grace that, made you kids turn out the way you did.
Yeah, decent. We turned out decent.
More than decent.
What was the toughest thing that you've been through, Mom, when you look back? Hardest time of your life?
I think probably the hardest time was when your sister, with Jamie.
Yeah.
When she started having seizures.
Oh, wow.
I don't even know if you remember that.
I don't. I was so young.
Yeah, she was in. We got a call in one afternoon, and I think she was probably in 2nd grade, I want to say. She was like 8 or so.
Yeah.
8 or 9, saying that something was wrong. She was drooling and she was sick.
Oh, my gosh.
And Dad came and picked her up, and she was having a full-blown seizure, grand mal seizure.
Oh, my gosh.
And he calls me on the phone saying, get to the doctor, something's wrong with Jamie. And not knowing, my mom is severely epileptic. And so I had been raised with an epileptic mom. And so
You had seen that before?
Oh, yeah. She would have about 50 seizures a month.
Oh, my gosh.
And I can remember at 6 years old not going to kindergarten because I was taking care of her. And then when she would kind of come out of it and be okay, I would leave to school. And I did that for years and years. But not, seeing that happen to your child, and then they rushed her down to the hospital and they air ambulance her to the hospital, and just not knowing
to Reading? Is that where they flew her to?
Yeah, because we were in Weaverville. They flew her here. And they ended up not knowing what caused it. They thought it was infectious hepatitis. So she was in quarantine for a week. We couldn't go in to see her.
Oh, my gosh.
And then I remember them saying that they were going to do, of course, a brain scan. And that was the not knowing was so, so hard. I just remember your dad and I went to a park and just were praying and praying. God, just spare her life. And I remember the technician sneaking us into the room where he was at, looking at the different layers of her brain. And he's like, don't tell anybody I did this.
Wow.
And he was diagnosing the whole scan. He said, this is fine. This this is fine. They've never found a brain tumor because at that point they thought she had a brain tumor.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I wanted to tell you there's no crying on the BraveCo podcast.
Oh, well.
You got to toughen up, Mom.
I'll toughen up.
No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
I know.
Those are hard times.
It was really hard time, but, you know, and it ended up that they couldn't find anything. They put her on medication for epilepsy, and she was so allergic to it, she was hallucinating and having 105-degree fevers.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, at the house. We'd catch her. Yeah, so it, you know, that was just walking through things with your kids is just really, really, really tough.
It's the worst.
But we prayed over her all the time, and she had one more seizure after that when we were in Garberville, and we just knew that was demonic attack. Prayed over some more. She's never had another problem.
That's crazy.
With that.
So that would be the hardest time that you've been through.
I think so. You know, I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's, but it's way easier for me to deal with that than to have something happen to my family.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. You know, we're talking about my childhood and you parenting us kids through that. Looking back to, as a kid, you guys always encourage us to go on mission trips. So I've been to Mexico like 9 times, and we'd always go there and help out this orphanage, Rancho de sus Niños, and build stuff and, you know, minister to the kids and go to the dump, and which was super impactful for me, right? Because it's easy even back then to take your life for granted and think that everyone lives like you live. But going to the dump in Tijuana and realizing like, oh, kids are living in this stuff they're growing up in, it was just super helpful and impactful. But once again, like, you guys just did stuff that I look at today and go like, what? You're crazy. My sisters, you know where I'm going with this story.
Unfortunately, I do.
Yeah. So I'm the youngest, I'm the baby, and my sisters are, you know, year and a half and 3 years older than me. And there was this big mission trip to China that Bob Johnson was leading, which I don't actually think he was qualified to lead, but he was leading it. And he was taking youth group kids, right?
Yeah.
To China to smuggle in Bibles. So China back then was the real deal. So like, if you got caught with Bibles and stuff,
it was not good.
Not good. Not good. They were not kind. And you let the girls go. So Shannon was what, 12?
Yeah, 12 and 14.
Oh my gosh. 12 and 14. So they had dresses, like special dresses with pockets sewed into them.
Into the inside. So
the girls could put Bibles in there and then smuggle them in suitcases. And 2 things happen. One, Jamie, my oldest sister, gets caught smuggling Bibles and has this crazy confrontation with the lady they call the Dragon Lady. Where she's interrogated and like this really traumatic.
Like 4 hours.
Yeah.
And the gal that she was with, because they were told to partner with somebody, the gal that she was with kept slapping the Dragon Lady's hand because she kept putting it underneath Jamie's dress.
Yeah.
And Jamie's like freaking out because
she's in China without her parents. And then Shannon, right? So that's Jamie. They finally like confiscate whatever Bibles they find, and they let her go in to China, like back with the group into China. And then Shannon, she's 12 at this time. So for all you guys out there that have kids, think about your 12-year-old daughter. She's in China, gets separated from the group, right? Gets separated from the group that's ministering, and ends up at a telephone booth calling my dad. So she calls
in the middle of the night, woke us up.
Yeah. And is like, she's like, I don't know where I'm at. I got separated from the group.
Crying. And your dad was like, Shannon, look around. Do you recognize anyone like in China? I recognize there's a whole lot of people that aren't like me, and I don't know where I'm at. And she was crying, and
she's 12 in China and lost in communist China.
I don't even know how she knew how to make a phone call there.
Yeah. Well, and so I think Dad prayed with her, and right then a police officer came up to her, right?
That spoke English.
And was like, hey, what's going on? How can I help you?
Was just getting ready to take her back to the hotel, and somebody from her group drove by, and she said, I recognize them. They're from my group. And so she went off. But
you guys are crazy.
Well, and then with Jamie, when she got interrogated, your uncle Kelly, Jamie had called and talked to Kelly because we weren't here yet, and Kelly said, "Oh yeah, by the way, Jamie called." And he's like, oh, what did she say? She said she got arrested, but she's okay. I'm like, what?
He didn't tell the whole, he didn't get any more details. He didn't get any
more information. It's like, you stupid. And he goes, but she said and Chris like, your dad. He was going ballistic.
My dad worried so bad.
And he kept asking questions. He goes, I don't know. She kept saying she had to go.
But...
And so for 2 days we didn't hear from her.
Oh my god!
Again, so we're like, the only thing that we could hold on to was
she was okay.
She was okay. So we had no idea what happened, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh, so the stories that you guys have to tell, they're like, you need to write your own book.
Yeah.
And then they went from China to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And we get the last day that they're in Hong Kong, and the girls call and they said, Mom, Dad,
we don't want to come home.
We don't want to come home. We love it here. And your dad's like, you're getting your butt on that plane and you're coming home. But that whole thing was Tracy's fault.
Yeah, it was.
Because Tracy would sleep with your sisters in her room.
Tracy was the
missionary to the Philippines.
Yeah, so she would sleep in the room and tell the girls stories.
Yeah, one story after another. And to this day, I can't believe Shannon would go, especially since she's
such a scaredy cat.
She's such a scaredy cat. But Tracy lit a fire inside of them that just would not be quenched without them going. And,
Yeah, you guys laid a foundation of faith and action more than any other family I've ever seen. And it's something that I'm so grateful for in my life. And I think it's probably the thing that I hold nearest to my heart is that, although some of the stuff was traumatic and it was, I would never do that for my kids today, and you wouldn't do it for the grandkids.
I wouldn't let you.
On the flip side of that is what has grounded all of us so well is the gospel was alive.
Yeah.
And community was alive, right? And we were
much so.
We were doing the real stuff day in and day out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just so wild.
And we never did it by ourselves either.
Mm-hmm.
We were with, like you were talking about, a community.
Mm-hmm.
And we had people that were around us. You were raised in a very small town.
Yeah, 3,000 people.
Yeah. And it's different than being raised in a city.
Yeah.
In a small town, you need people.
Yeah.
And you rely on them, and you do life together.
Mm-hmm.
And so
do you miss that?
I do.
Yeah.
I cried when your dad said we were going to leave.
Yeah.
Weaverville and come to Redding. I thought I would die there. I never thought that we would leave. But, seasons come and seasons go, and God knew we needed to be there for one, to raise you guys in a place like that was there's no words that can describe that.
Yeah.
What you guys learned from that. Going through the good times, the bad times, the hard times,
Yeah.
sweet times.
Yeah. Yeah. Because in 1998, you guys came, you left Weaverville and you came to Bethel Church, right? To help Bill pastor.
And you were just getting ready to, you were doing your last year of high school.
Yeah, I was a senior. So I stayed in Weaverville with Marty and Jamie.
In our house.
Yeah.
Yeah. With your brother and sister.
Yeah. So my sister got married and to my now brother-in-law. And so when you guys left, I stayed and lived there, which was awesome. You know, you guys went through another really tough time when you left Weaverville and went down to Redding. The next year, well, that next year I graduated high school and got married, if you remember.
Yeah,
so got married super young. But then you lost your business.
Yeah.
You take a deep breath. Super tough time.
Yeah, that was another hard time. When you said what was your hardest, when you asked me what was my hardest thing in life, there was a lot of hard things. It just depended upon the year.
Yeah. Well, you guys, you were working at the church, weren't taking a salary at the church. There wasn't any money.
No.
Right. And then,
but we had agreed to that because we thought our business was going to be able to support us.
Yeah. And then we don't have enough time to tell it here, but a whole bunch of stuff happened. Your supplier ended up going bankrupt and your supplier owed you guys a bunch of money.
We were in a joint venture with them. They were buying us out. And so we didn't have to pay our parts bill, which when all was said and done through them and plus our other suppliers, we owed like $1.8 million.
Which is crazy. So
insane.
Yeah.
In 1998.
So you guys owe all this money. You don't have an income from the church here, and you just became pastors on staff, and you're bankrupt. Like you guys didn't have like you're whatever.
We had nothing.
You had zero.
We had nothing. Absolutely nothing.
That's crazy. Like how did you handle with that? How did you handle that stress?
600 square foot apartment, and
I remember it.
Had one vehicle.
Yeah. How'd you handle that?
You know, there again, looking back at all the times God came through in the hard times, knowing that he was right there with us. And I knew that he called us there to Redding or called us here to Redding because it's another long story, but the Lord spoke directly to me.
Yeah.
It was like an audible voice being spoken through a pastor at a conference. And so I knew we were where we were supposed to be, and I knew that God would get us through. I just didn't know what it was going to look like. And it was like, okay, God, this is a prime time for a miracle.
Yeah, like if I've got a few stored up, go ahead and release one.
I know.
And Dad tells a story when he preaches a lot. He tells a story about people just like were these random acts of generosity, or people would be like, "Hey, I've got $1,000 for you."
Oh yeah.
Hey, I've got $10,000 for you, and they wouldn't even know your situation, right?
No.
Like it wasn't like this was a public deal.
No.
And people just like giving you guys money.
We had a $900,000 loan reduced to $300,000, which that sounds like that's awesome, but we have no money.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't matter. And then that debt being forgiven by a man that worked for a bank that we didn't even know. And the guy said, just, we'll do an offer and compromise. I'm like, okay. So he's like, what do you have to offer? And Chris said, nothing. And he said, Chris, you got to give me something. And so your dad was like, okay, $10,000 on this $300 and some odd $1,000 note. And I'm not going to say the man's name, but he signed it and had to sign it and said, okay, I'll get back with you. And so we're like, oh, that was a joke. And he calls and he said, the bank won't take $10,000 on this note. And your dad said, they'd be crazy to. I didn't think they would. And he said, but they'll take $11,000. We're like, $11,000? And for a moment in time, we were so joyful until we realized, but we still have no money. We still had no money in the midst of all these little miracles happening all around us.
Yeah.
And so the guy the guy comes back, and we're praying like crazy, and God provides this $30,000 that took care of the $11,000 plus an IRS bill plus a State Board of Equalization bill.
You guys have had more bills than I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, I know. Paid for it all. And when the banker came to our business to sign off on it, he was in tears and he was crying.
Wow.
And Chris, your dad led him to the Lord. And he said, in all my years of banking, which he was in his late 60s, he said, all my years of banking, I've never seen this happen before. And he said, and you guys don't deserve what you've had to go through.
Wow.
And he said, not only did the bank forgive the note, but he wiped away the foreclosure that had happened, so as if it had never happened before.
Wow.
So, and then 2 months later, we saw an obituary where he had passed away.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I just can't believe that you guys went through that and didn't have to bankrupt. God completely provided for you financially,
time and time again.
Yeah, through just these random acts of blessing, kindness, and somehow, some way, you like made it through that season.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, having somebody that you love to go through that with, though, is,
Do you ever get to the point where you're just like, how much hard stuff am I going to have to go through in life?
Yeah, but I always tell myself, I don't know how I'm going to get through it, but I know I'm here today because I got through it.
Yeah.
And God will do it again.
Yeah.
I have a choice. I can be fearful and angry and bitter, or I can say, God's setting me up for a miracle. God's setting me up for a new season of my life. God's setting me up for success because he wants good for me.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we don't go through tough things, because, why do people pay money to go to a gym?
Yeah, work out
and sweat and build bulk and do hard things. Is because there's a result. There's an end, to that. And same with God. It's like he's doing this for my good.
So many people message us, all the time. Every day, and they're just, the world's a tough place. Marriage is hurting and kids hurting and whatever's going on. And I don't know how to say it. Like, life was never meant to be easy. There's no no one escapes the trials of life. You just don't. And you may have a childhood that's super, super simple, super easy. At some point, you're going to hit trial. And
it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor.
No. You have all the money in the world and
it's not gonna
hit big trials. You can have no money and hit big trials. And so it's like it's just so guaranteed that the thing that it's not guaranteed is that you're going to do a good job in the middle of it. But watching you and Dad navigate through just a lifetime of the hard stuff. You got diagnosed with Parkinson's 7 years ago now?
Yeah, probably about that.
Yeah. How did you, how's that affected you? And what was it like to get that diagnosis?
It was hard. For a couple years before, I kind of knew something was happening. I started having a tremor in my right hand. And then I tried to move my hand, and it would kind of, what they call ratchet. It wouldn't be smooth. And I thought, I just, sprained my arm for my horses or something. I pulled something wrong. But I decided I'm going to go to the doctor to see what they say. And I remember them saying, I'm going to send you to a specialist, a neurologist, just to put your mind at ease, because they thought it was just benign tremors.
Oh.
And then I get into the neurologist, and he said, "You have Parkinson's." And I'm like, I didn't know what to think. I mean, I was so shocked.
Yeah.
Your father was out of the country, so he wasn't there to even go with me to hear that diagnosis. And I thought,
that must have felt really lonely.
Yeah, I remember going to see your niece, Misha, because she was at school in Chico. And so I happened to go there and picked her up for lunch and just needed to be around some family. And
yeah.
so it was hard, but I thought I could fall into the trap of being like everybody else and focusing on my disability, so to speak, or I could do something about it. And so I've always been super competitive.
Yeah.
I've always been that way. And I thought, I'm not going to lose this race, and I'm not going to be defined as somebody with Parkinson's either. And so I did everything that and I'm doing everything that I can to be active and to, overcome this and to not give in and give up, but to push in and push out of the stigma of what somebody with Parkinson's can do and can't do. It's like, tell me I can't do something. Please tell me I can't do something, because that'll just push me to do it more and more.
Yeah. It's true.
Even our hunting trips and stuff that we go through.
Yeah, it's super fun. Well, you got diagnosed with Parkinson's, and part of the journey, I think, for all of us family was like, okay, well, how can we help? How can we contribute to just helping you fulfill, the lifestyle that you want to live? And so for me, it was super fun that year. I think that's the year that maybe a year after or something, I started to think through, like, man, maybe I should teach Mom how to fly fish. And so I did. I taught you how to fly fish. And some of our favorite times. Yeah, so we go out on the lake, and we didn't go last year much because I had babies. The last 2 years I've had babies, and that's always a challenge.
We're going to remedy that this year.
Yeah. So I taught you how to fly fish, and then, but that year as well, I took you and Riley to do a really cool hunt in Texas.
Yeah.
And what most people don't know about you, Mom, is that you're an absolute slayer. When it comes to hunting, you love hunting, and you just love to get after it. And I just love that about you. This last year, so we went to Texas a few years ago, 4 years ago or something, 5 years ago, and you shot some deer and turkeys and
bobcat.
Yeah, you got a bobcat. And then we went to
Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah, we went to Pennsylvania, and you shot a really big buck there.
Non-typical. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, just a giant buck, which maybe Tim can put up some pictures or whatever. We can drop some pictures in here of Mom's animals. And then I took you on a hunt in Idaho, right? Yeah, so we went and hunted elk. That was
crazy.
Yeah, so our elk hunt, I'll dive into that just a little bit. But our elk hunt was super cool. A friend of mine called me and said, hey, I got a depredation tag, which basically there's so many elk that come into this guy's ranch that Fish and Game give him a couple tags to be able to shoot in, the elk that are on his land. Just a couple, not like 100, but like 2 or 3. And so they were gracious enough to give us that tag. And I took you out there. And the first day, we had tried to do a couple stalks on elk and realized it was going to be a little bit challenging.
It's not that we didn't see a whole lot.
Yeah.
They were so far away.
Yeah. And then in some really mountainous terrain.
Oh, yeah.
Which is tough, right? Because you can't you can't hike and stuff with Parkinson's a ton.
No.
You can do some, but not a ton. And so what we ended up doing is, and it was awesome, is my friend Rob Wiley was there and Todd Pierce. And so it
was great.
Yeah, we got the horses because we had a bunch of horses. So we got horses. We put you on a horse in like 7-degree weather, a little bit of snow. There's lots of snow on the ground.
Lots of wind.
Yeah, lots of wind. And we packed you up into this hill and ended up.
You guys were on horses too. We all were.
Yeah. So we packed up on horses and we had seen some elk up in there earlier that week. And we just waited until these elk came out into the meadow. And then we got back on the horses again and rode through some trees and ended up sneaking into range.
I'll never forget that. I was so tired. My muscles were so tired and so cold, and I'm all bundled up and crawling on my knees trying to get underneath this tree to take this shot.
Yeah.
And then the elk were still so far away you couldn't even see them with your eyes. You had to glass them. And
yeah, you made an incredible shot. You shot that elk.
554.
Yeah, 500 yards, which was just awesome. And again, like another fulfillment of a dream, of just being able to, I get to take my mom on these hunts. And last year we had another one. It was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to fulfill another one of your dreams? And for those of you that don't like to hunt, you can fast forward through this stuff or whatever, but hunting's just a part of our life. It's what we do. It's who we are. So,
and we eat the meat.
Yeah. So this last year we went and got a black bear, but that was so much fun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We ended up, this place that we had access to, they had bears that were coming in and really like messing with cows and eating these cows' food and stuff. And so we ended up, the thing with that ranch was we could only shoot a crossbow. So it was archery only. So we got a crossbow and I taught you how to shoot it.
Yeah.
And we got all sighted in. And to make a really long story short, you shot a bear at 74 yards.
Yeah.
With your crossbow. And it was awesome.
It was crazy.
Yeah. One of the funnest hunts I've been on.
Oh, that was so much fun. I can remember getting set up and we were on the ground at that point, trying not to move because the bears were.
We'd seen a bunch of bears coming close.
A couple bears coming close and my glasses are for distance and I'm looking through my sight and it's messing. My vision's all blurry because my glasses are for distance.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to take my glasses off and you're quietly yelling at
well,
me, stop moving. And I'm like, I have to take my glasses off. Stop moving.
Here's what happened. We're sitting underneath this juniper tree and waiting for, hoping that these bears come in because it's not a guarantee. And we're sitting under this juniper tree and I see this massive, like 500 plus pound bear, black bear, walking towards us at like 150, 200 yards away. And I'm like, Mom, there's a bear right there. And the first thing you said is, get your gun. Get your gun. And I was like, Mom, calm down. You're good. I've got my gun. Calm down. So you're all nervous.
I'd never hunted a bear before. Yeah. I heard the crazy stories.
And we're on the ground, right? So we're on the ground.
Yeah, not in a car.
Yeah, and the bear's walking towards us. And then you decide that right at that moment, you decide I have to take my glasses off.
Because I couldn't see them.
Which was fine. So I'm like, Mom, stop moving. Like, I'll tell you when you can move. And you kept moving. I was like, Mom, stop moving. And you kept moving. I was like, damn it, Mom, stop moving. You're so stubborn. You are so stubborn.
Because I couldn't see.
I know.
If I had to take a shot and I couldn't see, it could have been really bad.
Close to being ready.
Well, and then the bear was so close to the cow.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was just crazy.
I only had a few inches.
Well, you had enough room. I mean, the cows were on the other side of the fence, but we made it work. We ended up, scooting over and getting up and moving and like it was crazy, but we did it. We fulfilled that dream. And
that was fun. That was a fun hunt.
Yeah. This next year we might do an elk hunt, which would be awesome. I would, a bull elk. You shot a cow elk,
yeah.
But a bull elk, which would be super cool. But Mom, you are just the most brave persevering, hardest working woman I've ever met in my life. And I'm so thankful for all the love and support that you've just poured into me and us kids. Thank you for raising us right, for taking us through the hard times and not hiding it from us, but teaching us how to do that. And just for being such an incredible mom. You know, you have been there through every step of my journey, from my divorce to my nervous breakdown to my remarriage, to, you know, helping my kids when they were in hard times. And I just can't thank you enough, Mom.
Well, I love you.
I love you too.
Thanks for the adventures and just who you are and who you've made me to become. Thanks.
I appreciate you, Mom. Well, that's it for this week's podcast. Hopefully you guys have a mom as cool as mine. And if you don't, you can you can borrow mine for a little bit here and enjoy these stories. But guys, stay brave out there. Have an incredible week. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.